So I'm Miss Teresa. I'm a prevention specialist with the Council on Chemical Abuse, and I'm going to be leading a lesson for really geared towards middle school students who are looking like 5th to 8th grade on vaping. So we're actually going to mute the adults, but of course the adults that are joining the call are more than welcome to attend and to listen and maybe even use this with your own kids that either you have as a parent or as a school professional. But we have two students on the call, so I'm going to be relying on Sariana and Spencer to be answering most of these questions, but of course the adults are welcome to play along as well. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. So again, we're going to be talking about vaping and JUULing, and of course how these companies are trying to fool our young people, and hopefully we can escape the vape and not be trapped by some of their tricks. This is a question for Spencer and Sariana. So when we ask students in middle school and high school, what is in your vape? What do you think they believe is in the vapes? This does not mean that it's correct. This is what they believe is in these vapes. So we're looking at the purple section here, this 56%. Do most kids believe that it's just flavoring, nicotine, marijuana, other substances, or I don't know? What would be your guess? What do you think most kids believe is in these vapes?
Just the flavoring.
You are correct. Absolutely. So unfortunately, there's 56% of middle school and high school students that are thinking it's just flavoring. And then the next percentage here, this 18%, is saying, I don't know. So we're looking at the biggest chunk of kids saying, we really have no idea what's in these vapes. We're saying it's just flavoring or I don't know. And that's obviously why we want to be learning about this, because we of course want to have some good information to make some good decisions. And we're realizing that most students are unfortunately greatly, uneducated about what is actually in these vapes. 15% did say nicotine, but again, even when it comes to nicotine, a lot of times most students are underestimating how much nicotine is actually in these products. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, figuring out what's actually in these vapes. And so the next thing that we're going to do is a little true or false. And so normally when I do this in classrooms, I have all the students stand up if it's true and sit down if it's false. I'm not going to make you do that today. So what we can do is we can just call out true or false, or if you don't want to call it out, and for the adults who are muted, you'll see that there should be a little reaction emoji that you can, again, do a little reaction emoji if it's true. And if it's false, you can just leave it blank. So we're going to just try these questions out. And Spencer and Sariana, feel free just to call out if it's true or false. So here we go. An easy one to get us started. The smoke from a vape is just water vapor.
False.
Yay, very good. That, of course, is false. It is not just water vapor. We're going to talk about what it is. Some e-liquid that says it is nicotine-free has been shown to actually contain nicotine. So what do we think?
True.
Very good. This is true, right? This is one of the ways they try to trick us and try to lie to us by saying there's no nicotine in these products when unfortunately there is nicotine. In a lot of cases, it's a lot of nicotine. We'll talk more about that. So what about this? It takes 6 to 7 seconds for nicotine to reach the brain when vaping or smoking. 6 to 7 seconds for nicotine to reach the brain when vaping or smoking.
True.
Very good. That is true. Yes, and we're going to talk more about that. But the main point here is, number one, is that nicotine gets into our brain very, very fast. And number two, our brain does not know the difference between smoking or vaping because the drug nicotine is the same in both of them. So what about this? There is always nicotine in the JUUL. We're going to talk about the JUUL, but is there always nicotine in the JUUL? What do we think? True or false? Sariana, you're saying false? What do you think, Spencer?
False.
So I know this is a tricky one. This is true though. So we're going to talk about the JUUL. The JUUL is just a brand name of electronic cigarettes, but they actually don't make any of their products that do not contain nicotine. So if we're using the JUUL, it always is going to have nicotine in it. So what about this one? Nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs.
True.
Very good. Yes, this is true. Yes. And what hooks you on vapes is the flavors. What hooks you?
False.
Yes, very good. What hooks you, Spencer? What is it?
The nicotine.
Yes, the nicotine. But why are those flavors important? What do the flavors do?
They get kids to try them.
Yes, absolutely, right? So they can attract us and make us interested in it. So have we heard of any flavors? Sariana or Spencer, have you heard of any of these flavors? What are some flavors you might have heard about?
Like bubblegum
Mm-hmm.
and like cotton candy or something.
Yes, very good. Sariana, have you heard of any flavors?
I don't know, but I'm gonna guess a guess. Grape?
Yes, absolutely. So unfortunately, yes, pretty much any fruit, any food, any dessert has been made into a flavor for these vapes. So very good. And like I said, this JUUL is just a brand name of electronic cigarettes, no different than like Nike is a brand name of sneakers. The reason why we talk a lot about the JUUL is because the JUUL was the first electronic cigarette that was really popular among kids, among young people, adolescents and teenagers. And the reason why, even though it's an electronic cigarette and there had been other electronic cigarettes before the JUUL, is because it looks so different. It looked like a USB or a flash drive. It did not look like a cigarette. It didn't look like something that you would smoke. And again, it comes in all these different flavors, which of course we're going to talk more about, but you know, that's what attracts kids and makes kids interested in wanting to try it. And as far as the JUUL is concerned, there's always nicotine in the JUUL. They do not make any pods. We're going to talk about what those are. They don't make any pods that do not contain nicotine. So if we're using the JUUL brand, it always contains nicotine. And this is what it looks like. And if I was doing this in a classroom, I'd actually have one to show you. And it's important to know what it looks like because, like I said, it doesn't look like a cigarette. It looks like a flash drive or a USB. So you might not even realize that this is what it is, that it's a vape. And again, the only thing this does is deliver drugs like nicotine and chemicals into our body, into our brain. And these little cartridges here on the side, that is, again, what the pods are. And they're different colors to represent the different flavors, but that's what contains the nicotine. And we said that nicotine is really fast. This is why nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs because our brain gets addicted to those drugs that get into it really fast. And nicotine is one of the fastest ones. So what we're going to do, I'm going to have everyone do this, is when I say go, we're going to take a deep breath. You're going to hold it for 6 seconds. There's going to be a little timer so you'll know when it's up, okay? But when I say go, everyone take a deep breath. Ready? Go. Keep holding it. Keep holding it. Hold your breath. All right, exhale. So in that amount of time, nicotine has reached the brain. And maybe when you're holding your breath, it seems like a long time, but for it to travel from that little pod into your brain in 6 seconds is really fast. And that's why, again, it's very addicting. And of course, vaping is addictive because nicotine is addictive. Like I already said, your brain doesn't know the difference between smoking or vaping. So if you're smoking a cigarette or vaping a JUUL or an e-cig, the drug nicotine's the same. You can get addicted the same way. Most nicotine, it comes from tobacco. That's, again, a plant, and the drug nicotine occurs naturally in that plant. And so you can get addicted to JUUL and other vapes just like a cigarette, but at a much faster rate. We're going to talk about why it's even faster with vaping. And I know we talked already about the JUUL, but there's lots and lots of different vapes out there, like hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of vapes and products out there. So regardless of what they're called, what they look like, what their name is, they all ultimately work the same way. And like I said, they're all drug delivery devices. Their only purpose is to deliver drugs like nicotine into the brain. And therefore, unfortunately, they all have the risk of doing some harm, right? And when we're talking about young people using them, teenagers, there's even more of that risk for harm. So a lot of these vape companies refer to this liquid that has the nicotine in it as e-juice. Why do you think they use that word juice? When you hear the word juice, what do you think of?
Fruit.
Fruit, absolutely. Would you say that juice is safe or dangerous?
Like the stuff you drink.
Yeah, like regular juice.
Safe.
Right, absolutely, right? When we're thinking of regular juice, right, we would say that juice is healthy, right? Juice is safe. Juice tastes good. Juice comes from fruit. Juice is for kids, right? So they use this word juice because the image on the screen here, right, that's what they want you to think of. They want you to think of regular juice. But the e-juice, this e-liquid that contains the nicotine, it's not regular juice, right? It's not like you just squeeze a bunch of strawberries and you're vaping strawberry juice, right? That's not how this works. There's chemicals in there. There's the drug nicotine in there. So don't, again, be tricked or fooled into thinking that just because they're calling it juice, that it's safe, because it's definitely not safe. So we want to make sure that we understand that it's not regular juice, even though that's what they're calling it. So here's my next one. 1 JUUL pod equals the same amount of nicotine as 1 pack of cigarettes. True or false? We might have heard this before.
False.
Ooh, Spencer, you are on the ball today, because this is actually tricky, because this was a statement that we heard a lot. And a lot of times we think it's true because the statement was heard so many times, but you're correct, it's actually false. So do we think that there's actually more nicotine in the JUUL pods or less nicotine in the JUUL pods?
More.
Yes, very good. I'm going to show you how much more in a little bit. But what about this question? The makers of JUUL and other vapes want you to get addicted. Do they want us to get addicted? You saying true? Why?
So you keep buying their product?
Absolutely. This all comes down to money, right? So yes, they know if we get addicted, right, we're gonna have to keep buying it. We'll keep spending our money more and more and more, and they'll get rich, right? So of course they want us to get addicted and get addicted young. So it's easy to quit JUULing or vaping once you're addicted. What do we think? Is it easy to quit once we're addicted?
No.
No, right? So that is definitely false. If we know anyone, especially an older person who smokes or who vapes, if we've ever asked them to try to quit, a lot of the times they'll say, it's hard, right? It's really difficult. It's not impossible. There's always help and support available for people trying to quit, but it usually takes a lot of work. You even sometimes, medication for that person to quit. So it's much, much easier to never start vaping, to never start smoking, than it is to try to quit once you're addicted. Because once you're addicted, unfortunately, you're addicted for life. So what's in a pod? Again, these JUUL pod flavors, they contain the nicotine, but there's also these other chemicals. So things like propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, flavorants, and benzoic acid are the main ingredients. And when we're talking about these flavors, they're made up of even more chemicals. So we have volatile organic compounds, of course, the nicotine, ultrafine particles, cancer-causing chemicals. So hopefully most of us have heard that cigarettes cause cancer. Now we're saying even the vapes can cause cancer. Heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead. So when we're vaping, we're actually vaping the entire device, and the device itself is made out of metal. And there's battery acid and other things in there. So we're actually breathing in pieces of the metal from the device when we're vaping. And then there's flavorings, like I said, and these have lots of chemicals in it, such as diacetyl, which is a chemical linked to serious lung disease. We're going to talk a little bit more about what some of these lung diseases look like. But even though they might look different, they all ultimately work the same way because vapes are all battery powered, right? This is something that you're not lighting with fire like a traditional cigarette. The battery is that heat source that's going to be heating up the e-liquid, which again contains the nicotine, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, flavorants, and other chemicals. And even though some of these chemicals, like vegetable glycerin, for example, maybe is safe to eat or to digest, it does not mean that it's safe to inhale or to breathe into our lungs. So again, these chemicals unfortunately are not good for us. And then there's this atomizer or coil, which again heats up this absorbent material or cotton. And here's the nicotine aerosol, right? That goes into our lungs. Like I said, it's not water vapor, right? It's actually an aerosol. So what aerosol is like if you've ever sprayed hairspray or now, Lysol or Febreze, right? Anything that is coming on like that, that's what aerosol is. And that's what, again, it ultimately is going into our lungs. And then everybody always wants to ask, what's better, what's healthier, what's safer, cigarettes or vaping? Well, unfortunately, they're both have a lot of, risky harms for a lot of the same reasons, because they both can cause cancer. They both have the nicotine, which we can get addicted to. They both have poisonous toxic chemicals. Now, cigarettes have tar, which turn our lungs black, and vapes have those metal particles. But ultimately, right, they both have a lot of risks and can do a lot of harm and can make us sick. And here's that classic statement. Like I said, a lot of times we heard this like on commercials, right? That one pod was equal to one pack. And how many cigarettes are in a pack of cigarettes? Does anyone know? Do you know how many cigarettes are in a pack?
21.
Very close. It's 20 cigarettes in a pack. Very good. And actually, like Spencer said, right, it's a lot more though. So we're actually looking at more like 4 packs of cigarettes, the amount of nicotine in one of these pods. So that's like 80 cigarettes, the amount of nicotine. So this is why young people are getting addicted to these really, really fast, because not only is that nicotine going into my brain very fast, but also there's a lot of nicotine going into my brain very fast. And the reason why everyone believed that statement as far as one pod equals to one pack is because it was on the JUUL website. Now, this is a screenshot from the JUUL website from 2018. It's no longer on the JUUL website. They removed it. We no longer hear this anywhere because we realized it wasn't true. When they first came out with it, everyone just believed JUUL. They took this statement as true. But this was one of those things, again, that they lied about and tricked us with. And when you actually do the math and do the science, you realize there's a lot more nicotine in those pods than what they actually told us. So here's my next one. The human brain stops growing at age 18. So obviously, I know you learned this in the alcohol presentation. So as a little review, is this true or false?
False.
Yes. What is that age that it stops growing at?
25.
Very good. And the JUUL and all electronic cigarettes are meant for adults only. So it's a little bit of a tricky question. Are they meant for adults only?
True.
Yes, very good, Sarah. That is true. Yes, because how old do you have to be to buy them? Who knows the age?
18.
Actually, it was 18 until December. It actually just went higher than 18 only a few months ago. Do you know what it is now?
21.
Yes, it is now 21. Back in December, federally, there was a law passed that's now 21 to buy all tobacco products, including vapes, And that's for every single state in the United States, so including Pennsylvania. So yes, it is now 21. So these products are meant for adults, right? You're not supposed to buy them unless you're over 21. But who are they targeting? Who do they want to buy them or use them?
Teenagers.
Right, kids, of course, and teenagers for sure. So this is what I was just talking about, right? Tobacco 21. So back in December, right before Christmas, there was a federal law that raised the age to purchase all tobacco and nicotine products. Like I said, that includes all of the vapes. So you now have to be 21 to buy all of them. It was 18, but now it's 21, even here in the state of Pennsylvania. But anywhere you go in the United States, that's the age. So teens who use JUUL or other vapes are more likely to smoke cigarettes.
False.
True.
So this is true. Yes, we're going to talk about that. And what about this one? Teens who use JUUL or other vapes are more at risk for developing mental health problems and addictions to other chemicals.
True.
Yes, very good. That is also true. And here's why. So again, a lot of times we hear, you know, that kids are saying, I'd never smoke a real cigarette, right? I've learned since kindergarten about the dangers of smoking. I know smoking hurts my health. I'm not going to smoke a cigarette. But going back to those flavors, right? I like cotton candy. I like bubble gum. I like fruit punch and grape and chocolate, right? So again, the vapes have all these different flavors that are things that we like as kids, that we're familiar with, that we know, that we have tried, you know, and therefore we become interested into maybe trying the vapes because of all these flavors. So unfortunately, again, that's how they trick us into trying them, because of all the flavors and not realizing it, that there's this drug nicotine in there, right? No different than a cigarette, that can hook us and get us addicted. So unfortunately, we are more likely to start smoking if we vape, because that drug nicotine is the same. And once my brain's addicted, it doesn't care where it comes from. It just needs that drug. So if it's from a vape or if it's from a cigarette, you know, my brain is just going to want more and more. And a lot of times it happens, you know, because of the cost. Now, cigarettes are expensive, but vapes are a lot of times expensive too. So depending on what you can afford, if you're addicted, you might switch back and forth. And this is, again, the most important part, right? We said our brain is still growing until what age?
25.
Very good, right? And so I always say that the brain that's still growing and developing, it's like Play-Doh. So you, Spencer and Sariana, your brain's like Play-Doh. You guys have played with Play-Doh before? You know what Play-Doh is? Okay, good. Good. So your brain's like the brand new cup of Play-Doh, right? You just took it out. It's all squishy. You can shape it and mold it into all different kinds of things. What happens? You take that brand new, you know, ball of Play-Doh and you dump glitter all over it. Can you ever get the glitter out? No, right? You can't get glitter out of anything, right? So that glitter now is stuck in that Play-Doh. It is permanently changed, permanently altered. And that's what happens when we're taking a brain that's still growing and developing and we put a drug like nicotine in it. That nicotine is like the glitter, where again, it can cause permanent brain changes, even permanent brain damage that can last forever, right? It can last for the person's life. So this is why we want to make sure we're not putting anything into our brain, into our body that could hurt us or cause any permanent brain changes or damage. And I always joke that people over 25, their brain is like the old Play-Doh. You forgot to put the lid on, it got all dried out, right? So that doesn't mean that drugs like nicotine can't hurt an older person's brain or they can't get addicted after you're 25. But there's more of a risk for a young person's brain. Your brain is more vulnerable because it's still growing, because it's still developing. And therefore, again, we need to make sure we're protecting our brain, making good, healthy choices to keeping our brains and our bodies safe. So nicotine is a depressant, meaning it calms you down and relaxes you. Again, if you paid attention to the alcohol presentation, right, you know that alcohol is a depressant. Do we think nicotine is also a depressant? Spencer, I see you shaking your head. So I know this is a tricky question, but you're right. It is not a depressant. Nicotine is actually a stimulant, no different than caffeine. So what does caffeine do to the body? When you drink caffeine, what happens?
It like speeds you up.
Right, absolutely. It makes you more hyper, right? More active, right? More jittery. But I know, again, if you know any older person who smokes or vapes, a lot of the time, the main reason that they say they smoke or vape is because it calms them down, right? They need it to relax. They need it for stress. However, that's not actually happening in the body because nicotine is a stimulant. So they're actually being more sped up, more anxious, more jittery, not actually calming them down or relaxing. So of course, my question here, does JUULing or smoking really help you to relax? The answer would be no. So this is our body relaxing, right? When we're actually relaxed, our brain is calm, our heart is calm. So Spencer and Siriana, what are some healthy ways that we can calm down and relax that do not put chemicals or drugs into our body?
Sleep.
Sleeping, absolutely. Sleeping's great. Siriana, what about you?
Being on meds helps you fall or fall asleep or keep you calm.
I couldn't hear you, hon. What did you say?
If you're on meds, it keeps you calm.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So you're right. There are medicines that absolutely will help you. If you have like a diagnosis where you need medicine to help you, absolutely. That is another way that would help your body to stay calm. You're for sure. And so some other ways would be like listening to music. I know you guys talked a little bit about this with the alcohol presentation, right? But you talked about listening to music, playing with your pets, going for a walk, maybe talking to a friend, reading a book, right? All of those things are ways that we can help to relax and calm down in a healthy way, taking some nice deep breaths, doing some yoga, some stretching. So this is our body on nicotine. As you'll see, the brain is happy because he got its drug. So the brain is constantly saying, give me nicotine, give me nicotine, give me nicotine, give me nicotine. So when I get my nicotine, my brain says, oh, thank goodness I got my nicotine. I'm happy in this moment. But again, it doesn't last long. So I'm not completely satisfied. I'm just happy right now. But meanwhile, the rest of my body, especially my heart, you can see my heart, it's like running on a treadmill or doing jumping jacks constantly. My whole body is getting all sped up, especially my heart. It's putting like 40% more stress on my heart, making my heart and everything have to work so much harder and faster. So it's like the rest of my body just got on a roller coaster and they're going, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so this is the cycle that we get trapped in, where I have to constantly be, using nicotine, either vaping or smoking, right? Because if I don't get my nicotine, I'm in withdrawal. And when I'm in withdrawal, I don't like it. It does not feel good. So these are some of those symptoms of nicotine withdrawal, where I'm irritable and I'm miserable and I'm cranky. And so that's why I constantly have to be vaping or smoking over and over and over again and getting more and more once I'm trapped, once I'm addicted. So what do we think? Do we believe that these vaping companies are targeting us? Do you think that they are? All right, well, let's take a look. The next little game that I have is called Cigs or JUUL. So I'm going to show you two ads. All right, one of them is a JUUL ad. So you just have to tell me either number 1 or number 2, which one is the JUUL ad? What's your guess? Number 2? Siriana, what's your guess?
Number 2.
All right, you guys are correct. Very good. But I hope you can see how similar that JUUL ad is to the cigarette ad, right? I mean, both those women are standing almost exactly in the same position, holding the JUUL and holding the cigarette the same way. So again, this is something to consider. Which one here is the JUUL ad? 1 or 2?
I think 1.
1.
Good job. You guys are so good at this. Yes. Again, look how happy those ladies are, right? They're saying, my life is so great. I'm so wonderful, right? I got my cigarette, got my JUUL, right? This is how they trick us into making us think, oh my gosh, Everything's gonna be wonderful and great and happy if I smoke or use a JUUL. What about this one? Which one is the JUUL ad?
2.
Quad 2.
You both going with 2? This is a tricky one because it's actually 1. And look, the JUUL is in her hand here. You can barely even see it, but that's what the ad is. So again, happy people, right? Hanging out, enjoying life. But these are ads again for nicotine, right? That's what they're selling here. What about this one? Which one is the JUUL ad?
1.
2.
All right, so it is actually 2. It's so funny because, I mean, number 1, look, there's not even a cigarette in this picture, right? I mean, but that's what they're advertising. So again, these pictures are meant to look like people are having fun, right? People are enjoying themselves. That's what these ads are all about. And so here's 2 ads. So one is a cigarette ad and one's a JUUL ad. And what's similar? What is the message that they're trying to tell us with these ads? What do you see in the picture?
Like they both have drinks.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. So again, maybe it's coffee or hot chocolate or tea, right? But again, there's like this message of trying to, you know, be cozy and comfortable and feel good, right? So yeah, that's what they're trying to sell us with these JUULs and with these cigarettes by saying, hey, look, this is going to make you feel nice, right? These are going to, you know, bring you comfort. And here's 2 pictures. So these are both from Times Square in New York City. This is the cigarette ad, and here's the JUUL ad. And again, this cigarette ad is really, really old because cigarette companies are no longer allowed legally to have billboards. So this is from a really long time ago. So even though cigarettes are no longer to have billboards, right here we got the JUUL billboards, right, in Times Square in New York City. And if you've ever been to Times Square in New York City, you'll know that there's, I mean, I know everything's on lockdown right now, but normally, right, there's like billions and billions of people that go through there all the time.
I've been to New York before with my mom.
Yeah, did you have fun?
Yeah, it was fun. I went to the M&M store.
Oh, that sounds so cool. I know. I can't wait to go back to New York City, right? It's one of those things to look forward to. So here's 2 ads. And again, I know you can't really see the guy with the JUUL, but you kind of get this idea that he's lounging back, right? So these ads are meant to portray relaxation, right? You can see the girl with the cigarette, right? She's kind of lounging back, just kind of relaxing. So again, try to give you that idea of like, this is going to help you relax. Here's 2 ads that are supposed to represent sharing. So again, you see a cigarette, right, with 2 people and a JUUL with 2 people. So it's like, here, share your cigarette and share your JUUL with all your friends, right? It's more fun to do this with other people. And then these 2 ads, and again, I know this cigarette ad is really old, but it's meant to represent travel, right? So again, you got this lady packing her cigarettes, and here we see a suitcase with a JUUL. So again, all these messages, right, to try to trick us and to try to trap us into using these products. And of course, with the JUUL, with the electronic cigarettes and the vapes, right, they try to make you think that it's a tech device, right? They use all these different flashy colors similar to like iPods or iPhones. But like I said, right, that's not what these products are, right? They are tobacco products, right? They are a drug delivery device. And here's some anti-JUUL ads, which I like. So this says only one of these produces water vapors. And it's not the JUUL, right? It's this cup over here. And it says propylene glycol benzoic acid. Sounds more like a science experiment than a dessert because this flavor pod is actually creme brulee. But like I said, it's not actually creme brulee, right? There's all these chemicals in here. And of course it says this is not a flash drive, it's flavored tobacco. And so why are they targeting young people? Of course, you know, we already kind of touched on this a little bit about money, right? That's what they're all about. They want young customers, right, to replace their old customers, right? People that ultimately get sick or die from using cigarettes. And they know that if they can get you hooked before age 18, you're more than likely to be a customer for life, right? So, I mean, that's years and years and years of them getting, you know, money from you for buying their products. And there's lots of health and safety risks. So this is what we're going to talk about next. So I'm just going to put these all up on the screen, just some things to consider. Nicotine poisoning, secondhand vapor, popcorn lung, breathing problems, addiction, seizures. But what we were hearing a lot about in the fall, of course, this was something that the CDC was tracking before COVID-19, was symptoms of lung injury associated with vaping. And so did anyone hear about anyone getting sick or maybe even dying from vaping? Were you hearing about some of this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was some stuff that was on the news, like especially, back in the fall and in the winter. And so these are the symptoms that can happen from vaping. So things like cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, fever, weight loss, abdominal pain. Obviously doesn't sound very fun, right? And some people were getting so sick, they were even ending up in the hospital. And the scary thing about the vaping injuries is that these were all short term, meaning that the person who started getting sick was only vaping for like 90 days. So like 3 months after vaping is when most people were getting sick. So that's different than cigarettes, because with cigarettes, a lot of times, if you start smoking at 16, you're typically not getting sick right away. It's not usually until many, many, many years later that you start to suffer health consequences and start to have health problems from smoking. But with vaping, this was happening very quickly. They start vaping and then just 90 days later, just 3 months later, start getting very, very sick and needing to even be in the hospital. And so this is what happens. So we have these aerosol chemicals that enter your lungs. So there they go. Irritation and inflammation starts, right? Because your lungs know, right? These chemicals are not supposed to be there. Your body recognizes that something's wrong. So they send a type of white blood cells called macrophages to try to help out. And the macrophages eat the chemicals brought in by the aerosol because they know these chemicals shouldn't be there and are causing the issue. So they go and try to attack them. And they can sometimes digest the aerosol, but not always. So some of the aerosol stays in the lungs, kills the macrophages, and things get even more irritated and inflamed. And since some of the chemicals brought in by the aerosol aren't being removed, they further irritate and inflame the lungs. And over time, if you continue to vape, more of these chemicals will build up. And eventually the lungs become so irritated and inflamed that a person isn't able to breathe or process oxygen. So the inability to process enough oxygen or breathe is, of course, what unfortunately is killing people, right? If you can't breathe, obviously you can't be alive. And this is what it looks like on actual chest x-rays. You can see the normal lung on the left here, right? It's nice and clear. That's what your lungs are supposed to look like, versus the lung on the right, right? This is lung damage from vaping. And the official medical term for this is called EVALI. And you can see the lung on the left, or I'm sorry, the lung on the right is all cloudy, right? It looks like there's, stuff in the lungs. And so obviously that person would have a really difficult time breathing. They definitely would need to be hooked up to oxygen and even need medication to try to help their lungs because of the damage. The good news is, though, that students have the power to positively influence other students. So Spencer and Sariana, both of you can be role models to your friends, to your peers, that if you decide not to vape, not to use these products, other young people will also decide not to vape and not to use these products. And that's, again, what we're trying to encourage, right? Is we want young people to take a stand against these companies, right? Against big tobacco and the vape industry, and say, I'm not going to be used by you. You're not going to get my money, and I don't want this kind of addiction. So there's lots of different, organizations and agencies out there trying to prevent nicotine addiction and help empower youth to, say no to vaping and using these products. And again, 2 important points to remember to escape the vape is that these JUUL pods always contain nicotine, right? And most of these products always contain nicotine. And of course they contain nicotine because that's what addicts us, right? And that's what gets us hooked. And obviously the JUUL is an electronic cigarette, regardless of what the brand name is or what it's called or what it looks like, right? Electronic cigarettes all work the same and have the potential to do harm to our body. And that is my presentation. Thank you guys for all joining and attending the live lesson. This will be recorded so people can view at a later time. And, you know, I even will be able to offer this live again as well if, you know, schools or parents are interested in having their students view it.
Thank you.
All right, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for coming. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Enjoy the nice weather.
Bye.